Yo, what's up everybody? Welcome back for an episode of Into the Floo. In today's episode, I'm going to go over another deck. This will be a deck tech for you. This is a deck that I actually just kind of put together on my own, looking at a few decks that I had and some others that I played against. And so just try to figure a way to maybe, put something together for strictly characters. The starting character is going to be Hermione, so it kind of helps out getting some Hermione Creatures lessons out faster. I played it a couple times. It's done pretty well, but I haven't played it as often. So I'm just kind of putting it out there to see what you guys think about it. I've only played it a handful of times, a couple of times against a creature deck as well as non-creature decks, and it lost once against a creature deck that was spell heavy as well. So anyway, just kind of go through it, see what you guys think, and let's get into it. All right, everybody, here we go. This is another deck tech. Like I said, I played this deck just a few times. Really fun to play, and it's been pretty successful. I have lost, I believe it was once to another creature deck. But anyway, we're just going to go through it. You guys could, of course, let me know your thoughts on it. And I'm still kind of working with it, though, so I might end up changing a few things. And if I do, then I will be sure to post another one. So the starting character is Hermione Creature. And her ability is, if you already have 2 or more lessons in play, then whenever you use an action to play a lesson card, you may play 2 lesson cards instead of 1. So with that, I thought it might be pretty cool to have some sort of expensive type creatures, as you can tell by this one just hanging out right here, because it gives me the ability to put more lessons in play. Once I already have 2, then if I have 4 in my hand, then I can use both actions to put all 4, and that kind of just allows me to stack them up. So just kind of a good way. So what I'm going to do is start with going through which creatures I have, and then we'll move to like spells, etc. And then we've got some adventures here that are pretty good, and then the additional character that I have in the deck is a Hannah Abbott. What she says is, once per game, you may trade 2 cards in your hand for 2 non-healing cards in your discard pile. So just a good way to make sure that I'm able to stack up on lessons or get some heavy hitting creatures out there if needed. So let's go. All right, so we've got 20 Care Magical Creatures lessons in this deck. I'm still trying to debate if I should put a couple more, but so far it's been pretty good. There have been a couple times where I've just been hoping that I pull a lesson, so I don't really love that. But I do have a couple adventures that sort of slow my opponent down that have worked pretty well, as well as a couple other cards that are helping with that. So we'll get into that in a minute. So the first creature that I have here is a Norwegian Ridgeback. I only have one of these. To play this card, return 2 lessons from play into your hand, and it does 7 damage. So that one's a good heavy hitter. Even if you end up getting, like just this and something else, then it's always, pretty helpful. Anytime I have a creature deck, I always love putting Black Bat. It's just perfect. It only costs 4. It does 2 damage right away. So even if they discard it on the next turn, you still got that damage right when you play it. So I'm running 4 of those. I've got 2 Fang in here. I've actually never played with Fang in any of my decks, so I just thought it'd be kind of cool to add Fang. To play this card, discard 1 of your Care Magical Creatures lessons from play. When you play this card, do 4 damage to your opponent. So this is very similar to Black Bat in the sense that right when you play it, you do damage. So again, if they end up discarding it, then you still did damage. Because it's so expensive and it only does 4 damage, that's kind of why I think I've always been like, I don't know if I'm going to play it, but it does the 4 damage right when you play, which is something that a lot of the other characters don't do, especially at that amount. So that's why I was like, all right, let me just give Fang a chance, and it's been pretty well. Not too bad. Another dragon that we've got is the Welsh Green Dragon. To play this card, discard 2 of your Care Magical Creatures lessons from play. When you play this card, do 6 damage to your opponent. So this is an even more damage right away. Again, same same sort of strategy. Even if they were to discard it, then you still did that damage. And, you know, having even more of these is always beneficial because you could play 2 and do 12 damage right away. And then your opponent's really kind of getting into some muddy waters with that. So that's why I really liked, and I thought that it'd be kind of good to have Black Bat Fang and Welsh Green Dragon, because right away, again, you're doing damage. Which is good. I'm only running one of these, but like I said, I think I'm going to switch a couple things around and run a few more, especially with Hermione allowing me to add up more lessons faster than I would have. This is a good way of getting some damage. Another one of the dragons that we've got is Herbidian Black Dragon. To play this card, discard one of your lessons from play. It does 7 damage. It costs 8. So similar to the Norwegian Ridgeback, however, you're only getting rid of 1 lesson instead of 2, but the Norwegian Ridgeback, you return it to your hand as opposed to discarding it. So a lot of these little like nuances definitely have their benefits. So, you know, paying attention to what you want in your deck is important. You know, some people might not like that at all, but yeah, you know, just being able to have that option is always good. And I'm running 4 of these. I've got some Garden Gnome action. It's always awesome to have Garden Gnome. It's such a nuisance, and everybody obviously thinks the Garden Gnomes are annoying. But again, it's good because if you're taking that damage, then they're going to have to get rid of a card from their hand also, which I do consider damaging. So it's always nice, and I got 4 of those. And then we're running a couple Fluffies here. Fluffy is just crazy. I mean, super expensive. You have to discard 2 lessons, and it does 12 damage. 12 damage is unreal. You know, it's just like, wow, this is definitely a heavy hitter. I'm only running 2 just because of how expensive Fluffy is, and it might be unlikely that I get that many in time to play, that many lessons. But either way, still a really good card to have. So it's been pretty fun playing that. All right, here we've got some adventures that I like to play in this deck as well as others, but I'm running 2 Hagrid Needs Help. Hagrid Needs Help is one of my favorite adventures, and it's pretty detrimental. So essentially the effect is that your opponent gets 1 fewer actions, even on the turn they solve the adventure, which is always nice. To solve it, they have to take 8 damage, and the reward is they may draw 3 cards. So really, really like this adventure. You know, it kind of slows your opponent down with the actions as well as the damage. So that's always good. Hut on the Rock. In order for me to play this, I have to have 5 lessons in play. The effect is before each of your opponent's turns, if she or he has any cards in play, he or she chooses one of them and discards it. To solve it, they have to discard their whole hand, and the reward is that I take 5 damage. So, of course, I don't love taking damage, but if their hand starts to stack up, then having them discard it would be great. Or just getting rid of any card, of course, in play would be just as ideal, you know, which I'm sure they wouldn't want to do that each turn, so they're probably going to want to solve it. So that's always good. In the Spider's Lair, the effect is before each of your turns, you may show your opponent any number of creature cards from your hand. Your opponent takes that much damage. So to solve, your opponent takes 10 damage, and the reward is if you have any cards in your hand, you choose one of them and discard it. So this is good for running a heavy creature deck like this. So you might not have enough lessons in play in order to put one of those creatures out, but you could still show them all the creatures that you have, and they take that damage. So it's always nice to be able to still do some type of damage to your opponent, even if the card itself is not the one doing it. Into the Forbidden Forest, the effect is whenever one of your creatures does damage to your opponent, it does 1 more damage. So this is obviously going to be great for any of the heavy hitters that I have. Even something like Black Bat, of course, you know, it's like, why not? Like, just add anything. Any extra damage that we can get is what we want. And to solve it, your opponent skips a total of 5 actions. That's awesome, right? Because they're skipping actions, which means they're not going to play spells or creatures or whatever else. They're just going to skip them, and hopefully you can catch up or put some stuff down into play or whatever you end up doing with that time. So this is good, and the reward is your opponent may draw a card. Denoming the garden is similar to Garden Gnome in that at the end of each of your opponent's turns, he or she chooses one card from their hand and discards it. To solve it, your opponent discards 5 cards in this way. So if you have this in play as well as your Garden Gnomes out, then your opponent's hand might be depleted very fast. And that's cool. Why not? In order to play this, though, you have to have 5 lessons in play, which might not be hard with Hermione helping us stack those up. And then the reward is your opponent may draw a card. So not the best reward for something like that, but whenever your opponent draws a card as a reward, it's always like, damn, that's a slap in the face. Candy Car is another one of my faves. I love having Candy Car in my decks. In order to play this, I have to have 3 lessons in play. Before each of your opponent's turns, he or she draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards from his or her hand. To solve it, your opponent takes 10 damage, and the reward is your opponent may draw a card. I mean, like, yeah, the reward is so lame. 10 damage is crazy, and then drawing 3 and then getting rid of 3 before their turn even starts can definitely stack up, especially when they're also getting rid of cards from the Garden Gnome if that's in play. So it just ends up adding up. I've got 2 Riding the Centaur in case I am going against a creature deck. This is one of my favorites. Prevent all damage done to you by your opponent's creatures. To solve it, your opponent chooses 4 of his or her cards in play and returns them to his or her hand. And the reward is your opponent may draw a card. So that's always nice. Midnight Duel is a cool one that I don't see often. I don't play with it as often as I should. It's a really nice adventure. Play this card only if you have 5 lessons in play. At least 5 lessons. The effect is to use an action to play a creature or spell card from his or her hand. Your opponent must discard another card from his or her hand. So it's really creative. You know, it kind of like hinders your opponent and also makes them think like, dang, do I really want to play that? And so even if they end up not playing it at all, just because they don't want to discard another card, then that also saves you whatever potential damage that might have been, right? So to solve it, your opponent chooses 4 of his or her cards in play and discards them, and the reward is they may draw 4 cards. So really good adventure. I like it a lot. Again, I don't play with it as often as I should, so I'm definitely going to be stacking these up. And the last one, if I'm able to play it, I wasn't able to play it in the last few games that I used this deck because in order to play it, I need at least 9 lessons in play. But this is another really good one. We've got Meeting Fluffy here. Before each of your turns, your opponent takes 12 damage. Your opponent lets you choose 3 cards in play and discard them. 3 of his or her cards in play and discard them. And the reward is your opponent gets 1 more action the turn he or she solves this adventure. So this is really crazy. I mean, so much damage is done. If you have this in play as well as a Fluffy, I mean, it's just like unreal, right? So that can get pretty ugly. All right, so I got a little help with some spells, items, and locations. So I've got 4 Hagrid's House location card in here, which helps me with the lessons. So whenever a Care Magical Creature's lesson, yours or your opponent's, is discarded from play, put it into its owner's hand instead. So some of the creature cards that I have, like Fluffy, for example, to play this card, discard 2 of your lessons from play. Instead of discarding those lessons, I would return them to my hand if Hagrid's House is in play. So I'm running 4 of Hagrid's House in order to increase the probability of pulling it as well as being able to play it. And that's helpful with getting those lessons and making sure I don't discard more than I need. So that's been good. Dragonhide Gloves is an item. Whenever a creature does damage to you, prevent 1 of that damage. So I've got 2 of those, and that's just good in case I'm going against a creature deck. Then, you know, it's able to prevent some of that damage. And of course, Swarm. I've got 4 Swarm. Count the number of creatures in play, yours and your opponent's. Do that much damage to your opponent. So, Swarm is just another one of those cards similar to Black Bat that I have whenever I have any type of creature cards in a deck. It's just really helpful and it does extra damage, especially if you're able to stack them up. And even if you're not and you only have a couple of creatures in play, then it's still very helpful, especially if you've got 2 or 3 or, you know, whatever else, and you can continue doing some damage, which is always a nuisance and really annoying for your opponent. All right, everybody, that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the deck tech. I'll have more to come. And if anybody has built a deck from the Pojo.com list that I put in the other Hooch deck tech episode, then let me know and share with us. Let us know what that's about. If you've enjoyed them, if you looked at any of them. And again, for those that are interested in playing the game, if you do not have physical cards, then please let me know. You can leave a comment below, or you could also hit me up on Instagram, and I'd be more than happy to work out a deal with you to get you a deck, because I definitely want to be able to help in getting people to play the game more. And I know that a lot of cards are kind of getting expensive, and I've sold quite a few decks for really cheap. So if you're interested in that, then please let me know. You can hit me up, like I said, on Instagram. And either way, have a good time, have fun, be safe, and we'll see you next time.